Brutal argument between Hamilton and Leclerc during the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Stay until the end to find out what caused the explosive clash between the two tifosi drivers. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. Lewis Hamilton's weekend in Emilia-Romagna descended into absolute chaos behind the scenes, erupting into one of the most shocking and emotionally charged altercations the paddock has witnessed in recent years. What had started as a string of underwhelming races for both Hamilton and Charles Leclerc came to a thunderous boiling point just moments after the end of the Grand Prix. The frustration, the tension, the unspoken resentments that had been bubbling under the surface for weeks finally detonated in the Ferrari hospitality suite, away from the cameras but not far from the ears and eyes of stunned insiders. This wasn't just a disagreement. This was a full-blown confrontation between two of the most intense, passionate, and proud drivers on the grid. Two men who feel the weight of expectation not only from their teams, but from the entire world. Those close to the situation say the atmosphere inside Ferrari had been deteriorating ever since the Miami Grand Prix, where a series of cryptic and contradictory strategy calls left both drivers hanging out to dry. Hamilton, new to Ferrari this season, had reportedly been trying to exercise patience, trying to understand the culture, as he told close associates, but his patience was already wearing thin. Leclerc, meanwhile, felt increasingly sidelined, frustrated by what he perceived as the team shifting too much attention toward integrating Hamilton, while neglecting the momentum he had built as Ferrari's longtime golden boy. There were whispers in the paddock that Leclerc had already complained to team principal Fred Vasseur behind closed doors, while Hamilton, true to form, kept his concerns tightly guarded until the moment they exploded in spectacular fashion. It all came to a head on Sunday evening. The race had been a nightmare. Ferrari had shown promise in qualifying, but race pace vanished in the opening stints. Hamilton was heard over team radio describing the car as dead in the water and impossible to drive through turn 9. Leclerc, for his part, had been audibly furious with the strategy yet again, questioning the timing of his pit stop with a tone that barely disguised his contempt. By the time both drivers returned to the paddock, there was a sense of quiet storm approaching. Mechanics whispered. Engineers kept their heads down. Something was coming, and everyone could feel it. Inside the Ferrari hospitality suite, Hamilton was seen pacing like a caged lion, still in his race suit, the top half peeled down to his waist, revealing a sweat-soaked compression shirt. His towel, hanging loosely around his neck, kept slipping off as he muttered to himself and checked data on a tablet. His race engineer had tried to calm him, but Hamilton wasn't listening. He was boiling. Leclerc arrived moments later, helmet still on, speaking rapidly in French to his own engineer. His words were clipped, angry. When he spotted Hamilton across the room, there was a pause, a beat of silence that felt like the air had been sucked out of the space, and then he walked straight toward him. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. What happened next was described by one insider as the most intense face-off I've ever seen between teammates, and I've seen some wild stuff. At first, they stood just inches apart, exchanging words in low, cutting tones. But the volume quickly escalated. Hamilton gestured sharply with his hand, pointing toward the pit lane exit, and was heard saying, "You keep diving into every corner like it's the last lap at Monaco, and you're blowing the whole strategy apart." Leclerc, face flushed and jaw tight, shot back, "At least I'm fighting. You're just here for your Netflix moments." That jab cut deep. Several staff members later said they saw Hamilton's entire demeanor change. His fists clenched. He took a step closer, his voice now raised. "You think I came here to retire quietly? I came here to win, and I'm dragging this car as far as it'll go. But you're just desperate to prove something. Every lap is a personal crusade." Leclerc didn't back down. He removed his helmet in one sharp motion and slammed it onto a nearby table, sending a bottle of water crashing to the floor. "Don't talk to me about proving myself," he snapped. "I've been carrying this team while you're still figuring out how to make your damn seat comfortable." The shouting drew in a handful of team personnel, who stepped in between the drivers, trying to defuse what many feared was about to become physical. Hamilton's chest was heaving. Leclerc's eyes were blazing. The confrontation was so intense that a senior Ferrari executive reportedly called for both drivers to be separated and sent to their motorhomes. Security wasn't involved, but only just. One source described it as seconds away from total meltdown. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. The aftermath of the altercation was just as turbulent. Leclerc cancelled his media commitments, while Hamilton offered a tense, robotic interview where he avoided specifics and simply said, "We've got work to do. That's all I'm going to say." Behind the scenes, Ferrari management was in crisis mode. Team principal Fred Vasseur held private meetings with both drivers individually, attempting to calm the waters and salvage the weekend. But the damage was already done. Word had spread like wildfire through the paddock. Rival teams, overhearing snippets of the exchange, were stunned. One Red Bull engineer was overheard saying, "If that's what's going on at Ferrari, they're not winning anything this year." This wasn't just about one race. It was about identity, pride, leadership, and legacy. Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, is in the twilight of his career but still hungry for an 8th title and determined to leave a mark on Ferrari's storied history. Leclerc, the homegrown hero, feels the pressure of being the face of Ferrari's future while watching his status challenged by a living legend. The chemistry between them, which many had hoped would be electric in a positive way, has instead become volatile, like two stars in the same orbit, inevitably crashing into each other. In the days that followed, attempts were made to paper over the cracks. Both drivers issued carefully worded statements about constructive dialogue and passion for the team. But anyone who witnessed the explosion in Imola knows the truth: something has broken. And once broken, trust is almost impossible to rebuild, especially under the pressure cooker of Formula One. As the calendar marches forward to Monaco, the world will be watching not just Ferrari's performance, but every glance, every comment, every moment of eye contact, or lack thereof, between Hamilton and Leclerc. The battle lines have been drawn, and the fight for supremacy at Ferrari has only just begun. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. According to several insiders with direct knowledge of the matter, the altercation between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc after the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix was not just a flare-up, it was an eruption of deep-rooted tensions that had been quietly simmering for months, if not since the very first moment Hamilton walked through the doors at Maranello. It wasn't about a single strategy call or a botched pit stop. It was about identity, about territory, about pride. Two alpha drivers, both used to being the undisputed center of attention, now forced to coexist under the same scarlet banner, found themselves standing toe-to-toe, voices raised, in the heart of the Ferrari garage, while bewildered engineers and mechanics froze mid-task. The verbal clash was so intense that team personnel from both sides, Hamilton's newly integrated crew and Leclerc's long-standing team, were forced to physically intervene, forming a human barrier to prevent the situation from spiraling into something even uglier. Fred Vasseur was called in immediately, not via radio or text, but reportedly with a breathless, in-person message delivered by his most senior engineer. Vasseur rushed down the paddock stairs and into the garage like a man running toward a fire, and what he found was exactly that, a symbolic inferno of clashing egos and raw emotion. Hamilton, visibly shaking with rage, reportedly pointed at Leclerc before turning his fury toward Vasseur. His voice echoed through the space, drowning out the hum of idling machinery. "If this team can't manage two drivers without imploding, then maybe one of us shouldn't be here." The words didn't just hang in the air, they detonated. Silence spread like a shockwave. Eyes widened. Breaths were held. You could hear the clank of a dropped socket wrench echo against the wall. Leclerc, standing just feet away, did not flinch. His body stiffened. His hands curled into fists. His expression? A mixture of fury, disbelief, and hurt. He stared directly at Hamilton, not with fear, but with challenge, pure defiance. "Then say it. Say it if you want me gone." Those who were there say the moment felt almost cinematic, as if time slowed down. The stare-off that followed wasn't just personal, it was symbolic of a wider escalating civil war within Ferrari. People close to the situation suggest that this wasn't merely a result of what had happened at Imola, but rather the latest chapter in a season-long breakdown of trust and communication between the two camps. As early as Bahrain, whispers began circulating that Hamilton was privately questioning Ferrari's operational discipline. In Saudi Arabia, when Hamilton was left vulnerable on used tires and Leclerc stayed out on fresher rubber, sources say Lewis's post-race debrief turned into a subtle but unmistakable critique of the team's lack of clarity and purpose. Then came Australia, where both drivers were left exposed to strategic undercuts, neither defended, neither protected. That was reportedly the first time Hamilton openly questioned whether Leclerc's side of the garage was playing fair. Leclerc, for his part, has been on edge ever since Hamilton's arrival was announced. Despite public statements welcoming the 7-time world champion, Those close to the Monégasque say he's been wary from the beginning. After years of being the anointed star of Ferrari's long-term vision, Leclerc suddenly found himself having to share the spotlight, and more painfully, the development direction of the car. Hamilton brought not only prestige but also a well-oiled entourage of engineers and analysts who began to influence technical decisions from day one. Leclerc reportedly felt blindsided when, during a setup meeting in Suzuka, his input was overruled in favor of a simulation package proposed by Hamilton's side of the garage. That moment, insiders claim, marked the beginning of a silent rebellion. There have been constant whispers in the paddock, engineers refusing to share telemetry, strategy calls that favored one driver over the other, subtle changes to pit sequence orders that seemed minor at the time but grew in significance as the tension thickened. By the time the calendar reached Imola, it was as if the dam could barely hold. Every miscommunication was a trigger. Every decision was scrutinized. Every glance exchanged between the two drivers was laced with unspoken resentment. The argument after the race was merely the spark that finally set it all ablaze. And yet, when they stepped in front of the cameras post-race, both Hamilton and Leclerc wore the masks of diplomacy. Their words were careful, measured, rehearsed. Hamilton talked about learning moments and team cohesion. Leclerc spoke of unfortunate timing and collective responsibility. But what they didn't say spoke louder than anything they did. Neither mentioned the other by name. Not once. No acknowledgement, no praise, not even a cursory nod. For two men who had just spent nearly 2 hours on track fighting side by side, and sometimes against each other, that silence was deafening. The paddock took notice. So did the fans. On social media, clips of the alleged argument circulated like wildfire. Lip readers and body language experts began dissecting footage from the garage. Analysts speculated that Ferrari's internal structure might be on the verge of collapse. And now, insiders say Vasseur has been forced to step in behind closed doors, conducting one-on-one meetings in a desperate bid to repair what some describe as irreparable fractures. But perhaps the most telling sign of all came the following morning. Leclerc arrived early to the Ferrari hospitality suite, alone, not flanked by his usual small entourage. He kept his head down, barely speaking to the press. An hour later, Hamilton showed up, separately on foot, with headphones in, completely detached from the team's media schedule. The two didn't cross paths. They didn't even glance at each other. And for a team fighting for a championship, that kind of emotional distance between its two stars may prove far more dangerous than anything that happened on track. What happens next could define Ferrari's entire season, or even the fate of one of its drivers. Because now, it's no longer just about points or podiums. It's about control. About who truly commands the future of the Scuderia. And as long as both drivers continue to believe they are the rightful king of Maranello, peace may be nothing more than an illusion. Hamilton's latest move on social media sent shockwaves through the F1 world, even though it came in the form of just a single sentence. True strength is silent, but it doesn't stay silent forever. Posted to his Instagram stories in the early hours of the morning, the message appeared cryptic to some, at least initially. But for seasoned fans and insiders, there was no mistaking the intent. The line oozed tension, frustration, and something that has been bubbling beneath the surface for weeks, perhaps even months. It didn't take long before speculation exploded across X, formerly Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram comment sections. Was this Hamilton's way of calling out someone specific? Was it aimed at Ferrari's top brass, his new teammate, or perhaps the entire F1 political machine? No clarification followed. Hamilton didn't need to name names. The silence following the post was louder than anything he could have said outright. Just hours later, Charles Leclerc fired his own salvo, not with words, but with an image. A throwback photo from earlier in the season, standing on the podium, eyes defiant and posture proud. The caption, however, was razor-sharp: some play politics, others race. The message was brief, yes, but there was venom between the lines. In the cutthroat world of F1, where every message is dissected by millions in real time, it was a thunderous statement. And the timing? Impossible to ignore. Not even half a day separated both posts. Coincidence was never an option. Fans immediately began drawing lines, connecting dots, and taking sides. What had been mere whispers around the paddock, tensions between the two star drivers, had just been flung into the open, set on fire, and broadcasted across the globe. Within minutes, hashtags like #Hamilton vs Leclerc, #Ferrari feud, and hashtag Maranello meltdown were trending. Thousands of comments poured in from every corner of the internet. Hamilton loyalists rallied to his defense, claiming their icon had been forced into a political spiderweb that he never asked to be part of. He came to Ferrari to race, not to babysit egos, one user posted, racking up over 30,000 likes. Others argued that Ferrari was clearly favoring Leclerc, using every tool to protect their chosen one. But Leclerc's defenders were equally loud and just as passionate. "Charles is Ferrari," read one viral post. "Hamilton is a guest here. If he can't handle the heat, maybe he picked the wrong kitchen." Inside Maranello, the chaos could no longer be contained. According to sources close to the team, top-level executives were blindsided by the social media crossfire. What began as subtle tension has now erupted into a full-blown PR crisis. Multiple Italian sports dailies reported that Ferrari's communication team was in panic mode, scrambling to draft unified public messaging while avoiding the appearance of taking sides. But it may already be too late. An emergency meeting has reportedly been called for early next week. Both drivers are expected to attend, along with senior leadership, including team principal Fred Vasseur and, perhaps most significantly, Ferrari chairman John Elkann himself. Elkann's involvement is a telltale sign that this is no ordinary intra-team squabble. It has become a reputational issue for the brand. According to whispers from inside the paddock, Elkann is deeply concerned about the optics of a civil war playing out in real time under the Ferrari banner. One source even suggested that Ferrari is now exploring the introduction of strict behavioral clauses in both drivers' contracts, an unprecedented move that would effectively muzzle them from making public comments, even indirect ones, that could damage the team's image. While still unconfirmed, legal experts have reportedly been consulted, and draft language is already circulating. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. This isn't just about words on social media. This feud may already be bleeding into the garage, and possibly even the data. Engineers have allegedly noticed growing reluctance between the two drivers' camps to share information during debriefs. Hamilton's side believes critical telemetry is being filtered, while Leclerc's engineers have raised eyebrows over perceived off-script setups that diverge from agreed strategies. Whether these suspicions are valid or just symptoms of deteriorating trust, the damage is real. Team morale is also taking a hit. Staffers are reportedly choosing sides in hushed conversations around the factory. Some longtime Ferrari engineers, emotionally invested in Leclerc's rise, view Hamilton as an outsider, brilliant, but disruptive. Others, especially newer recruits brought in as part of the team's modernization push, see Hamilton as a catalyst for needed change, someone unafraid to challenge sacred traditions and outdated norms. The atmosphere is tense, with every press conference, every glance in the paddock, every hand gesture between the drivers now being analyzed frame by fans and insiders alike. Even sponsors are getting nervous. One major partner has allegedly requested a private briefing with Ferrari's marketing team to understand the team's plan to ensure unity. In a sport where branding and reputation are worth millions, the specter of internal division is a red flag that no one can afford to ignore. Meanwhile, fans aren't just observing the chaos, they're living it. Online forums are flooded with theories, timelines, and even amateur body language analysis videos dissecting every clip from recent race weekends. Some believe the cracks started earlier than anyone realized, possibly even before the season began. There are posts going viral comparing pre-season interviews, noting the forced smiles, the body posture, the lack of eye contact. The writing was always on the wall, one Reddit thread claimed. We just didn't want to believe it. Now, the question isn't whether Hamilton and Leclerc are feuding. That's already obvious. The real question is whether Ferrari can survive it. Not just as a team, but as a unified force capable of challenging Red Bull, Mercedes, and McLaren. Because if the current implosion continues, it won't just cost them points. It could cost them everything. The Constructors' Championship, the Drivers' Championship, their credibility, their legacy. And yet, for all the turbulence, there's an undeniable electricity in the air. Formula One thrives on drama, and this clash between two titans has injected adrenaline into a season that was already on fire. Every upcoming race now carries double the weight. Every radio message, every pit stop, every overtake attempt between the two will be scrutinized under a microscope. The entire world will be watching, not just to see who's faster, but to see who breaks first. Because in Formula One, as in war, silence is never just silence. It's strategy. It's tension. It's the calm before a storm. And right now, the skies over Maranello are anything but clear. Toto Wolff's words echoed through the paddock like the crack of thunder before a storm. I'm not surprised. That's what happens when two alphas share one den. Delivered with a half-smile that spoke volumes, it wasn't just a soundbite, it was a warning. A warning to Ferrari. A warning to the grid. A warning to the world of Formula One. Because what's unfolding inside the scarlet walls of Maranello is no longer just a partnership, it's a battlefield. And the soldiers? Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. Titans of the track. Icons of speed. But locked in a silent war that grows louder with every lap, every pit stop, every glance across the garage. What began as a dream pairing, a 7-time world champion joining forces with Ferrari's golden boy, has rapidly mutated into something darker, something combustible. There's no trust. No shared vision. Only raw, unfiltered ambition clashing head-on at 300 kilometers per hour. And Toto's smirk? It was the kind that belongs to a man who's seen this movie before, and knows exactly how it ends. The paddock is buzzing, but the air around Ferrari is suffocating. Whispers turn to murmurs. Murmurs turn to rumors. And then, there's Carlos Sainz. Cool, calm, and yet curiously present. Spotted deep in conversation with senior Ferrari engineers behind the garage. Far from prying eyes but never far enough to avoid the lenses of the ever-vigilant media. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't laughing. He was listening, nodding, almost as if he was being briefed, or worse, recruited again. Because if Hamilton and Leclerc can't coexist, someone will have to leave. And Carlos? He's still close with the crew. He knows the systems. He knows the politics. He knows the car. He could slide right back in if Ferrari decides to pull the plug. The tension has escalated past rivalry. We're talking about a Cold War disguised as a driver lineup. Every debrief is a negotiation. Every strategy call is a potential landmine. The engineers are divided. The mechanics are walking on eggshells. The data is being scrutinized not just for performance, but for evidence. Evidence of favoritism. Evidence of sabotage. Evidence of betrayal. Hamilton is demanding clarity. He wants priority when he's faster, and he's made no secret of that behind closed doors. Leclerc, on the other hand, feels the weight of the red suit, the Italian flag, and the tifosi who've backed him for years. To be demoted or doubted, even subtly, feels like treason. He's not just fighting for points anymore. He's fighting for his identity within a team that was once his kingdom. And yet, it's not just about the two men in the cars. It's about what they represent. Leclerc is youth, loyalty, and long-term vision. Hamilton is legacy, experience, and the instant headline Ferrari has craved for over a decade. But those worlds are colliding, and the fragments are flying everywhere. Every camera angle during the next Grand Prix will be dissected. Every team radio will be mined for subtext. Did Charles hesitate when asked to yield? Did Lewis ignore an undercut call on purpose? Did the team pit one of them a lap too late, again? It's psychological warfare now, a chess match played out at 200 miles per hour. And the next mistake won't be chalked up to miscommunication. It will be seen as intent. Ferrari bosses are silent, but not blind. Vasseur is under pressure like never before. He sold this dream. He endorsed the vision of Hamilton and Leclerc as the ultimate duo. But what if this isn't the birth of a new super team? What if it's the unraveling of Ferrari's entire 2025 project before the summer break? What if Leclerc's frustrations spill over into open rebellion? What if Hamilton walks into the paddock one weekend and doesn't walk into the Ferrari garage? And then there's the media, feeding on every headline, stoking the flames. Headlines like the Italian Civil War, Hamilton versus Leclerc, Ferrari's fatal gamble, and Carlos waiting in the shadows. Fans are polarized. Former drivers are already picking sides. Social media is ablaze. Every race weekend now feels like the final episode of a season-long thriller, except the ending hasn't been written yet. The scoreboard might still say Lewis P4, Charles P3, but that's just numbers. The real story is the implosion that's threatening to rewrite Ferrari history. And if something doesn't change soon, they won't be fighting for wins anymore. They'll be fighting just to finish a race without tearing each other apart. This isn't about titles anymore. This is about legacy. About survival. About control. About which lion gets to rule the den. And as Toto Wolff, with all his history and all his scars, already knows, there's no room for two alphas in the same jungle. The question isn't whether Ferrari will implode. The question is, who will pull the trigger first?